Good evening, good to see you this Wednesday night. Let's all stand together and sing, "Oh, they tell me of a home far beyond the skies." Sing together the first verse of Unclouded Day. Oh, they tell me of a home far beyond the skies. Oh, they tell me of a home far away. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where my friends have gone. Oh, they tell me of that land far away, where the tree of life in eternal bloom sheds its fragrance through the unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded. Sing together on the last. Oh, they tell me that he smiles on his children there, and his smile drives their sorrows all away. And they tell me that no tears ever come again in that lovely land of unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Good singing tonight. We got to bring teenagers and kids in here every Wednesday, just at least for the singing, if nothing else. So good to have y'all here this evening. And we're excited to have the last week of this section of services where we have the teenagers and the kids all with us. Next Wednesday night, we've got Awana kicking off again for all the young people. We've got a youth group kicking off again for all the teens. And so it's good to have everybody together tonight and then right back to our normal schedule next Wednesday. So good to see you here this evening. Let's have a word of prayer and we'll continue on with our service tonight. Heavenly Father, we thank you again for the time together this evening. And I pray that you bless in all the services going on all across the property tonight. Our Bible study right here in the chapel will be with Pastor Marco and the Spanish ministry next door, and Lord, all those in discipleship this evening who are growing deeper in the Word of God. I pray that you bless in each one of those meetings and this evening as well. Lord, well, thank you for all you do now. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. You can be seated. And if you would, be in prayer for Pastor Miller. He is not here tonight. He is very, very sick. And so he came in the office yesterday, and we promptly asked him to leave. And he didn't listen real well, but he stayed much of the day, but just sounded very rough and was hoping to feel better today, and is a lot worse. And so if you pray for Pastor, and he's not able to be here tonight, and so pray that he's able to recover and be back on Sunday. You know, if he doesn't come to preach, he's really sick. So he may not come to do a lot of other things, but if he's not here to speak and to preach, I know he's he's very sick. So pray for him while he's out, and that he'll recover very quickly here. We have just a few announcements of some things upcoming. Don't forget, our men's prayer breakfast is coming up this Saturday at 8 o'clock right next door in the activity center. So men, we'd love to have you come, and we'll start eating at 8 o'clock, have some time of fellowship, spend some time together in prayer, and have a good time together. So men, would love to see you this Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. And then this Sunday is our Vision Sunday. And so again, Pastor was down sick today. I ended up driving over to his house to meet with him for a while. We just ended up running through some things for Vision Sunday there at the house. So be in prayer for him, and as we mentioned, but be in prayer for Vision Sunday. And I hope you'll come looking forward to what the Lord has placed on Pastor's heart as by way of vision and theme for this next year. and at the same time being able to look back at what the Lord did in our church over the last year. So it's been exciting just going through some of those statistics and thinking through of some of the great things that have happened in our church in 2023. So I hope you'll be here this Sunday on the 14th for Vision Sunday. And then our next starting point class kicks off on the 21st. So we're starting off with a bang. We got a lot of things coming here at church. We've got the starting point class going for 4 weeks. And so if you are newer and not a member of the church and newer to Front Range, would like to learn more about our church, starting point class on January 21st at 9:45 is where you need to be, right next door in the gymnasium. So meet us there for starting point 4 Sundays at 9:45 in the morning. Have a good time getting to know more about our church. And then also on the 21st is our next baptism Sunday. And so if you're like most people on Sundays, you don't pay attention to the announcements, and I understand that. Go back to the website, go back to the church app, the Church Center app, and you can look up these dates. But 21st is the next Baptism Sunday. And so if you'd like to sign up for that, you can see one of the pastors. You can come talk to us or call the church office. We'd love to get you signed up for Baptism Sunday coming up right around the corner. And then don't forget, those of you who are 60 and older, you're invited to come to the next Lamplighters activity. That's on Monday at 1 o'clock right here in the Activity Center. And so if you have not signed up yet, please see the LeBoos right out here in the lobby on your way out. Get your name on the list and have you ready to go for the Lamplighters. And so a lot of things going. We're getting ready to launch here very soon. Opening up tickets for Wild Game Dinner that's coming up in February, and we're already making plans for that and getting ready to go for Wild Game Dinner on February 20th. I looked it up yesterday. We've got Easter coming in about 11 weeks. So a lot of things coming, right? But he'll be here before we know it. So just pray for very little snow in between now and then, and we'll be glad to get there to some spring weather. Well, tonight we're excited to have Bruce Linafelter come. Mr. Linafelter, go ahead and make your way up here. And Pastor called this afternoon and said he asked Mr. Linafelter to speak tonight. And so he's got, if nothing else, he's got some pictures he's going to show, so that'll keep your attention tonight. But we're so glad to have Mr. Linafelter come speak for us.
On? Can you hear me? Yep. Good. As he said, I got a call today around noon. Pastor says, can you put something together for tonight? As well, and probably nothing that some people haven't seen, but I am excited to be here and share. I had a handout. Did everybody, is the pile gone, Pastor Luke? Okay, so if you didn't get one, if somebody has an extra they'd like to share around, whatever, I tried to do one per family, so Sarah's not here tonight, so can't have her go run off a few more. Anywho, Israel is in the news so much because of what's going on in the conflict there that I thought that it would be good for you to see what we've seen in Israel as opposed to all the pictures in the war or of the war that you've been seeing the past few months, and that just give you a perspective of what we do when we are in Israel, and at the end give you a little bit of a challenge as far as what's going to happen in the future in Israel for what we can see from now. This is going to be a real whirlwind trip. Some of you that went with us in 2023, you'll see your picture up here a few times maybe. I want you to be looking for that, so don't sleep through it. Baptists for Israel Institute is an organization that was founded in 1974. Bonnie and I have been a part of the organization since 2008, hosting trips. This was our 4th trip to Israel this last March. We had 26 from our church that went, and we were joined up with a few others from a couple of other churches. The organization was founded very simply to make the Bible come alive for believers. So many people that go to Israel for trips to Israel don't realize that when they get over there, their guide is maybe a Jewish person or an Israeli Arab person who has been taught a script to say or reads from a script literally while you're there, and they don't get a believer's perspective. They get basically an Old Testament perspective. You ask them about Jesus and they'll say, well, he was maybe a good man, and I've heard about him maybe or whatever. So Baptist for Israel Institute was founded to give believers a chance to go to Israel. So what you're going to see tonight is just a real quick overview and some familiar things, maybe of Bible stories that you've seen and heard in the past. And at the end, we probably won't have time for questions, but if you want to catch me anytime and ask questions about it, I'll be glad to help you out. Israel as a country is not real large, about the size of New Jersey. If you drove from Fort Collins to the Utah line, that's about 262 miles. That's how far it is from the top of Israel, north to south, to the bottom. And going across, it's only 72 miles. So from say, Fort Collins to down near Parker or somewhere in that area south of Denver, 72 miles. So it's not a very large country at all. It's a very heavily populated, obviously. And so we're going to talk tonight about different things about the map that you have in front of you. And I'm going to point out different things, and I've got numbers on there, and I'm going to give you some Bible verses. And so if you can see on the screen here that number one, we're going to start in our journey in the Galilee, near the Sea of Galilee. It's number one on your map. The Sea of Galilee is a beautiful place, very, very peaceful. This is actually a view of the Sea of Galilee from the southeast corner, and on a calm day, obviously. It's the Sea of Galilee itself is about, if you take a bike ride around, it's about 33 miles around. Over there, they don't call it the Sea of Galilee, they call it the lake. So when I say the lake, I'm referring to the Sea of Galilee. About 33 miles around, 13 miles long, and about 8 miles wide. It's fed by springs and by the Jordan River overflow coming out of Mount Hermon from the north. It's the deepest point. It's only 141 feet deep. So there's places that Horsetooth are somewhat close to what the Sea of Galilee. It's the lowest freshwater lake on earth. Second lowest lake on earth, only second to Dead Sea. The Mediterranean, we're going to talk about the Mediterranean area, so you can look at number 2 on your map. We're going to head from the lake over to the northwest, and the great majority of Jesus' ministry took place in this area in the Galilee. A lot of the things that I'm going to talk about are things that are regarded as this is probably where it happened. There are very few things in Israel that you can say this is exactly where it happened. Most of it is historically correct and historically sometimes guessed that way. But the different things that we see in the Galilee and all around Israel are at best sometimes guesses. This is the Sea of Galilee. This is looking over from the corner of the lake over towards Tiberias. Tiberias is a pretty modern city. This is on the other side of the lake, and this is a banana field. And a banana field, banana is a big crop in Israel right now. And this is the probable site of the Sermon on the Mount. And we know that when Jesus taught on the side of the lake, he would get out in the boat sometimes. His voice would be amplified over the lake and was on the side of a hill. And so this is a probable site for the Sermon on the Mount. It's also near the place where the feeding of the 5,000 took place. It's near Capernaum, and we know from the Bible references that Capernaum was close by, so that's why they guess that this is what it is. Capernaum it's in Israel. I got to put this one little aside. Jesus officially doesn't exist in Israel because the Jews don't recognize Jesus, okay? But you will see signs like this around Israel. You'll see signs and references to Jesus and even New Testament. And every once in a while, you'll even see a cross here and there, because the Jews in Israel have realized that if they will allow the Christians to come in and do things like this, the Christians will come to Israel and spend money. You know, kind of simple. I mean, that's the truth behind it all. So this is the village of Capernaum. Capernaum was the hometown of Matthew, of Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John. It's located on a main route called the Via Maris, which is basically a major travel route during the old Bible times. a Roman centurion had his daughter, Roman centurion from Capernaum, his daughter was healed by Jesus. He was stationed there because of the significance of the location of Capernaum. Matthew was a tax collector in Capernaum. From Matthew 9, we know that that's where he was stationed. Capernaum has, I got to get here, I'm trying to do two things at once here. In Capernaum is a synagogue. And we know that Jesus taught in the synagogue at Capernaum. Now, there's a little dispute whether or not this is the actual synagogue, but nobody disagrees that this isn't where the synagogue was located. There were two synagogues, one built on the top of the other. And so this is a synagogue, and most people do believe this is the synagogue that Jesus taught. So our group pictured here is actually in the location where Jesus taught in the synagogue at Capernaum. So that's pretty exciting to know that you were someplace where Jesus actually was, and this is documented that way. Also in Capernaum, Capernaum is the home of Peter, and the Catholic Church considers Peter to be their first pope. And so they decided that this particular foundation in the background there was Peter's house. They just took a guess, but they decided that's where it was. And then they built a church that looks like a flying saucer over the top of Peter's house. And the church has a glass floor on it, so you look down into Peter's house. There's no documentation for that, but that's what they decided they would do there. Near Capernaum is another little village called Chorazin. There were three villages in Matthew 7 and Matthew 11 that Jesus put a curse on: Chorazin, Capernaum, and Bethsaida. He put a curse on them because they rejected his teaching, and he put a curse on and said, these villages will never be rebuilt. And to this day, there are ruins like that, all three of those villages. Whereas Tiberias is a thriving city, and there are other cities that were there when Jesus was there, but these three villages were not. We got on a boat and took a boat ride on the lake, on the Sea of Galilee. This is a tourist boat. This is not the kind of a boat that Jesus would have ridden on, but it's a tourist boat. And they are equipped to handle tourists very well. One of the trips we made, the Jewish people and also the Israeli Arab people know how to please their tourists. The captain of the boat couldn't speak a lick of English, but about halfway through the trip, he put a CD in the player, and it was, I will make you fishers of men. He could sing the song perfectly in English. He knew all the actions, everything that we did when we were growing up, and then he held up his tip jar when he got done singing the song. One of my favorite trips from the trip, Steve and Marcy on the boat going across the lake. When we get across the lake, on the other side of the lake, we go to a place called St. Peter's Fish. St. Peter's Fish is from the book of John, chapter 21. After the resurrection, Jesus was on the shoreline roasting fish on the coals. And this is what it would have looked like. This is a fish. It's actually tilapia. And it's roasted on the coals. And when you order the fish, this is the way it comes. And you're supposed to eat everything that doesn't look like a skeleton, because when you get done in the end, that's what you wind up with, is your skeleton of your fish. And it's very tasty, and it's a pretty good sized fish too. You can see the size on the plate. Some people chickened out. And ordered pizza. So they did have pizza on the menu too if you didn't want the fish. We leave that place, we go on to a place called Bet Shan. And Bet Shan is located in northern Israel at the junction of the Jordan River Valley and the Jezreel Valley. Excavations here have determined this area was first occupied around 5000 BCE. Now in Israel, they don't use BC and AD like we do, because that would refer to what? Before Christ and after Christ's death. So instead they use BC, E and CE, Common Era and Before Common Era, which is basically the same measuring stick that we use, but they just won't use Jesus' name in it. This is probably the most, the place that is most like what I would envision ruins to be like outside of Italy, and I've not been to Italy, so Bet Shan is a very interesting place. There's all sorts of Bible references to Bet Shan. Joshua assigned, in Joshua 17, he assigned this area to the tribe of Manasseh, but they were unable to drive the locals out because the locals had iron chariots, and that was in this area where that happened. But the ruins there, this has all been excavated, and the pillars and things like this there's one area where they were all on the ground where there was an earthquake that toppled some of them, but for the most part, they're still standing. This is the theater that's there. The theater is still used. There were actually 2 more layers on the top of the theater when it was first built by Caesar. It would seat over 7,000 people there, but they still have concerts there. There's a stage there. When we were there was a group from some country we couldn't figure out, but they were singing a little concert on the stage, singing to us in their own language, and we never could figure it out. Not far from Bet Shan is Megiddo, and on our trip this year we didn't have much time at Megiddo because we got caught in a traffic jam because there was a protest going on in Israel at the time. But Megiddo overlooks the Jezreel Valley, also known as the Valley of Armageddon. The Valley of Armageddon is about 20 miles long and about 14 miles wide at the widest point. And you can see it's beautiful farmland. It was once all swamp. And when the Jews came in the early 1900s, they drained the swampland and made it very, very fertile ground. It really is a beautiful place. And from the top of the Megiddo, where we were at, you could see the whole valley like that. And it's just an amazing thing to see. Also in this area is this pool. This is the pool of, guess who? Who had people lapping from a pool? Gideon. And this is the pool of Gideon. And they've got a fence in there so you can't go down and stick your mouth in the water like Gideon had his soldiers do. But this is where it actually happened, was there. Okay, we're going to move on our map now a little bit farther away to Nazareth. Nazareth as a modern village. You can see a few American influences there. There's a KFC not far from the entrance to the town. What we do mostly in Nazareth is we go to a recreation of Nazareth in Jesus' time. And right in the center of a big city section, there's a fenced-off area, and it's the Nazareth Village Experience. And they have recreated what Nazareth would have been like when Jesus was alive. So they have characters and that around, and they do acting for what people would have been doing that time. They have some sample shops that would have been in Nazareth at the time. Our host in Israel, the Bro family, they've actually gone there and volunteered and been a part of this. While we were at the village, we had a noon meal there, and the meal was prepared on dinnerware that would have been like what was there in Jesus' time. So it's all pottery, made of pottery from local clay, and then the food was, it was very typical of the time. We had lentil stew. What else? Russell, help me out. Lentil stew was the biggest thing, and bread. They baked the bread right in front of us. What was something? Tell me, Mike. Hummus. Yeah. So it was quite an interesting meal. They had demonstrations going on for people that were weaving, making pottery, carpenter shop. And this was the most interesting spot because this is the synagogue recreation from Nazareth. And you think of when Jesus spoke at that synagogue, you think of a big church like ours. This is not a very big room. And this would have been the size of what the synagogue would have looked like in Jesus' time. Now we're going to go out towards the Mediterranean Sea, number 4 on the map. Mediterranean Sea, Pastor did a really good explanation of Caesarea. Caesarea was built by Herod the Great in honor of Caesar Augustus. He built an extensive harbor and built foundations down in the water using techniques that are still studied today because they were so far advanced for the time being. And Caesarea is another one of these places that is one of these interesting where they allow things to happen. Caesarea is where Paul was on trial and where he said, I appeal unto Caesar in Acts 25. And they have excavated where they found the foundation of the government building in Caesarea. And this is a little plaque there, and it actually has the quote from Acts 25 on the plaque in English and in Hebrew. And it says, "I appeal unto Caesar," which again, according to Jewish people, they wouldn't even admit that Paul ever existed or anything like that, but they allow this to happen because people like us come and to see these things. I get asked a lot, have things changed? Do we ever see anything new in Israel? When we go, this was one of the fun surprises this year. There's excavation continuing on in Caesarea, and you can see this is not an area that's open yet to tourists or to visitors because of the ladder, but they have found the prison where Paul was in jail. And this is the entrance to that underground prison, and there's a series of tunnels under where we were walking where Paul was actually in jail. Caesarea also has a big amphitheater built by Caesar, and Pastor has given us several different things that happened there, but it's a huge theater and still being used as a stage today. Not far from Caesarea is Mount Carmel, number 5 on your map. It's not really a single mountain, but rather a mountain range, about 13 miles long. It comes out of the Mediterranean Sea, and it's at the north end of the Jezreel Valley. There's a statue here of Elijah, and this statue commemorates Elijah when he killed the 450 prophets of the prophets of Baal from 1 Kings 18. This is an interesting view from Haifa. Haifa is at the end of the Mount Carmel range. When Elijah, in 1 Kings 18, Elijah sent his servant out to look over the bluff and see if he sees any storm clouds coming. Okay, he would have stood on this bluff looking over the Mediterranean Sea and looking for rain clouds to come. We're going to move further north now, up 6 and 7 on your map, to a place called Hatzor. Hatzor is a very interesting place because it's first mentioned in the Bible in Joshua 11. They have reference there from in 2000 BCE on. In around 2000 BCE, the population of Hatzor was over 20,000 people, 10 times larger than the population of Jerusalem. It's located again on the Via Maris and is a major trade route between the north and into Egypt, and then going back up into Asia Minor. Hatzor is interesting because there are layers of civilizations. And we have a hard time understanding that because we build a house and there's a foundation, you dig down, there's nothing there but dirt, and you build your foundation. Here they have uncovered 22 layers of civilizations through the years. And over several thousand years, obviously, this can happen. So a civilization maybe is defeated by somebody else. It sits empty for a couple hundred years. Another group comes in and say, oh, this is a good place. I think we'll build here. And they build right on the top of the old one. But in Hatzor, they have uncovered 22 layers. Hatzor is also interesting because it was rebuilt by Jabin. And in Judges 4, it's where we learned about Jabin and Deborah and driving the stake and the whole bit. That's all part of the Hatzor story. The other thing that's interesting about Hatzor is that in 1000 BCE, King Solomon built 3 fortified cities, one in Hatzor, one in Jazer, and one in Megiddo. And he used the same blueprints for the outside gates for each of these 3 cities. And you can actually take the drawings from this one, put it on top of this one, on top of this one. The biblical record is totally accurate in this case. This is one of the beginnings of the Great Jordan River. It actually comes out of a spring out of the side of the mountains in several places up in the Hatzor region and farther north, up in the Caesarea Philippi region. It doesn't take long during the snow melt. When we're there in March, the snow melt from Mount Hermon is coming down. It's a mighty rushing river. But most of the time, the Jordan River is not quite so mighty, rushing and gushing. This is the Jordan River down by Jericho. The Jordan River runs from the springs up by Mount Hermon down to the Dead Sea. It's only about 70 miles from this point A to point B, but the river goes for about 150 miles because it weaves all over the place. But it's not some place that, this is actually a baptismal site, and people will go get baptized there, and they have their white robes on, and the white robes come out brown when they come out of the water. When we were there was some groups there, but the water was so dirty that day they weren't getting in the water. They were just kind of standing, and the priest was kind of throwing sprinkle on them. I think we didn't see too many go in that day. This is a road to Damascus. This is up in the north by Caesarea Philippi. This is the farthest north that Jesus traveled. The road on this bridge is where Saul was confronted by the Lord. It's also in Luke 8 where the woman with the issue of blood said, if I touch the hem of his garment, that was on this road. And so it's a pretty historical place. We're going to go a little bit farther south now and into an area that's got a lot of things to it. And as we head south, we're probably not 50 or 60 miles south of where we've been in the north. And you can see the things are really changing quickly. This is a monastery overlooking Jericho. And the topography of the land is greatly different. And this is the entrance to the city of Jericho. They call themselves the oldest city of the world. And of course, the most famous thing about Jericho is the walls. And this is the remnants of the walls of Jericho that came tumbling down in their view. And it's where the walls would have been. So this is probably pretty accurate to say. We stop at this place because Zacchaeus was a wee little man. And where did he climb the sycamore tree? But in Jericho, and this is a sycamore tree. It's got a big kind of a plaque around it that, this marks the spot where Zacchaeus climbed the tree. We go a little bit farther south, we go to Qumran. Qumran is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And Dead Sea Scrolls are pretty important because all the fragments of the Bibles that were found, and basically this was a cave. There's some openings to the cave at the top. Some shepherds were throwing rocks into the caves, and when they threw a rock in, they heard it hit something different, not just a thud on the floor of the cave. They heard it hit a different sound, so they went and explored, and they found basically vessels. They're kind of like clay pots, about this high, and they were full of fragments of Scripture. The complete book of Isaiah. This was in 1946, which is very historically important because Israel was going to become a nation in just 2 years, and the Dead Sea Scrolls really verified what Israel had been saying about their own history because it was found in the Old Testament record. A little bit farther south is one of my favorite places to go, and that's En Gedi. En Gedi is just a beautiful oasis in the middle of the desert. Waterfalls coming off the plateau. Just a little bit of rock formations, and there's a trail that you can hike up to the top and back down again, which was great fun. There's caves all over the place. David, when he was hiding from Saul, he went into a cave. When David clipped off the hem of his garment, that was in a cave at En Gedi. And the Bible says, and the Song of Solomon speaks of the vineyards of En Gedi. Dead Sea's not very far away, and when we go to the Dead Sea, we always pick up the morning paper, just lay back and read. It's a great place, and there's a little bit of Americana at the Dead Sea as well. We're going to go now farther into the desert, into an area of Beersheba and Isus, but what I want you to notice right now is to the left where it says Gaza Strip. It's so interesting because of all the land of Israel that you've seen and all the square miles and so forth. That's where the war is at right now, in that little piece of real estate. That little piece of real estate that's occupied by Israeli Arabs. Now you notice I don't call them Palestinians because there's no such thing as a Palestinian. A Palestinian is an Arab who was kicked out of his own country and wants to come and live in Israel. Or he could go back to any one of his original Arab countries, but they don't want him back. So they've decided that they will settle in Israel and cause problems. And that's what the issue is right now. But that little piece of land there, the Gaza Strip, is where all the contentious fighting is right now. This is wilderness area, not too far from Dead Sea, going south a little bit more. When Abram was called out of his land to go to a land I'm going to send you, guess what? This is the land where he was sent. And this is what it looks like. It was wilderness. And God told him to move, and this is also where some of the wanderings when the Egyptians, when the Jewish people left Egypt, this is some of where the wanderings took place. And it's just basically a vast wasteland, and no roads except for the one that we're on there. But if that road wasn't there, how would you know where you're going? You know, that's why the stars were such a big deal to them, because that's what they used for direction. We did a little camel ride into the desert, and Mike and Mary can attest to the fact that camels are not very comfortable to ride on, especially if you're in the back seat. The front seat's not so bad, but the back seat, just, I don't know, it's an awful wide saddle for me. But we took a little camel ride to a campground in the desert, and these are hieroglyphics that are found on the rocks in the Negev. These hieroglyphics can be dated back to the time when Israel left, or when the Jews left Egypt. And so to me, this is one of the most exciting parts of the trip, because this tells me this is where they were wandering, and there was actually manna on the ground where we were walking at one point in time. And I just, that's an exciting thing about Israel to me. We stay overnight, one night. All the rest of the times we stay in nice 4 or 5 star hotels, but one night we stay in a Bedouin campground out in the middle of the desert. This is the dining hall. Do you notice something's missing in the dining hall? Chairs and tables. Because when you eat in the Old Testament times, they didn't have chairs and tables. You reclined at the table on the floor. And you basically, you could lay down on your elbow and lay sideways, and then you would bring the food up. But we did have some tables and chairs for, we won't say who needed them, but there were a few people that were at a table and chairs, folding chairs. When the food came, it came for the table. And basically there was a big tray in the middle, and that roll there is kind of a pita type bread. If you would unfold that thing, it was bigger than the big tray itself, and you basically broke off a chunk of the bread, and there was rice, and then there was beef, lamb inside in that center section, so you would fill up your little pita with whatever, and then the fixings around the outside were different veggies, and of course hummus on the top. And that was the meal that we had there at that night at the campground. Next, we're going to go a little bit south to one of my favorite spots. This is the Elah Valley. Elah Valley is a place where very few tour groups go. Elah Valley is obviously where David fought Goliath. And you can see there's a ridge on one side of the valley, and there's a ridge on the other side of the valley. And so the Philistines would have been on one side, and the Israelites would have on the other side. And when David challenged them, he would have gone out in the middle where Goliath was. But otherwise, now it's just a field, generally of grain of some sort, usually rye. And we're there in March, so it's a rainy time of the year. The crops are all green and beautiful. It's my favorite place to go because that story just intrigues me. When our daughter first went to Israel in 2006, she said, "Dad, what do you want me to bring you?" I said, "I want one thing. I want 5 smooth stones from the Elah Valley." She said, "Dad," she said, "there'll probably be a concession stand set up selling bags of stones and slingshots made in China." And I said, "No, I don't care. That's what I want you to bring me." No such thing. When you go, there's the creek bed where David went to get his 5 smooth stones. Somebody said to me, "Well, they probably haul those rocks in during the night in dump trucks and dump truckloads of smooth stones." No, in the winter rains, when the winter rains come, it washes down stones from the mountains. and fills the creek bed. And then as the creek bed dries out, there's a whole new fresh batch of stones there every year. So after we were done, we went down and picked up our smooth stones. I always bring back 7 or 8 pounds of stones, because when I do presentations, I hand out stones. And every time we go, except this year was the first year it didn't happen, but every time in the past we go, they always search my suitcase. And they pull out this bag of rocks. And they look at me, "You dumb American, what are you going home with a bag of rocks from Israel for?" But they don't understand the significance of David's conquering Goliath in that valley. So finally, we're going to hit to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem obviously is the center of attention for a lot of things, and one of the highlights, or one of the main highlights of our trip. This is the view of the old city from the top of Mount of Olives. Visible in the center is the Dome of the Rock, obviously. This is where the temple once stood, Solomon's temple, and the temple later on that was built after Solomon's temple was destroyed. The old city walls are about 2.5 miles in circumference around. The significance for this place where the temple stands is obviously for the Jewish people. This is the spot where Abraham was told to go to sacrifice his son Isaac on Mount Moriah, and this would have been Mount Moriah. For the Muslim people, this is important because this is where Muhammad was translated to heaven without dying, at this spot. And for all of us, it's important because the third temple will be built on this location as well. This year was was the first time that I took a small group up to the top of the Temple Mount. It's not something that we normally do on our trips to Israel because it's a very volatile place. And Brad, our host, doesn't like to risk it because there's riots up there, there's stabbings up there all the time. But this particular day it worked out. We had a group that was going through Hezekiah's tunnel, and we had a dozen or so of us that didn't go through Hezekiah's tunnel. And Brad said, "I watched the news last night. Would you like to take a group up to the top of the Temple Mount?" And so it was very interesting. We had to go through 2 metal detectors to get up there. And this is basically the base of the Dome of the Rock. And you can see that all the mosaics. This was built around 691 CE, so it's been there a long time. And the top of the Temple Mount, where it's located, I don't know off the top of my head, and I didn't look it up today, I forgot how many square miles it is up the top, but it's a huge, huge area where thousands and thousands of people could gather in this big open plaza around the Dome of the Rock. It's a very interesting place. This is looking at the old city wall from the top of Mount of Olives again, but interesting here is the gate in the center. This is the Golden Gate. Jesus passed through this gate with his disciples on Palm Sunday. Now you notice that it's filled in with stone now. It's been walled up since the 9th century. Why is it walled up? Because according to Jewish tradition, Messiah will enter Jerusalem through this gate. The Jews don't want anybody thinking that Jesus ever went through this gate, so they walled it up, and they're waiting for Messiah to come through this gate, and when he comes, it'll be a different story. On the other side of this gate is all Muslim territory, and they put a cemetery there. They put a cemetery on the inside of the gate because the Muslims know that it's not legal for a Jewish person to walk through a cemetery. So they figured if they put a cemetery there, when Messiah comes, he's not going to walk through that gate because he can't walk through a cemetery. So the cemetery is still being used today. So the city walls are just amazing to me. In Nehemiah, we were told how Cyrus allowed the Jews to go back and rebuild the temple and the city walls. Ezra and Nehemiah, around 444 BCE, started rebuilding the walls. They were again destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. And for the walls that we see today were built around 1537 to 1541. They're just an amazing piece of of work where they have measured these things with digital measurements and how close they are to being totally plumb. The stones are just, I don't know, tons. Some of them are hundreds of feet long. How they transported them, how they got them in place like they are, that to me is just amazing. This is looking, now we're down at the Old City, we're looking back up at the Mount of Olives. There's a cemetery on the side of the hill that's still in use today because the Jews say that when the Messiah comes, he's going to come on Mount of Olives. And if they're buried on the Mount of Olives, they're going to be the first one into heaven. And so that's why they still use this cemetery today. This is Kidron Valley. Kidron Valley is viewed from the city of David. We're on the city of David, and the Mount of Olives is over on the left side. Kidron Valley during Old Testament times was a garbage dump. And today you can see on the left side of the screen there is basically the Muslim side, and the housing, the way it's all built close together like that. The Western Wall is something that was, it's the closest thing that Jews can come to the Temple Mount. This is the Western Wall is actually part of the foundation of the original temple. It's the closest that Jews can come to where the temple stood. So that's why it's so sacred to them. When the temple was destroyed in 70 CE, this wall survived. In the Six-Day War in 1967, the Jewish people took over this area again, and they did some excavating and really found this foundation. And they've also done excavating down into the ground. And we've taken a tour that goes way down into the ground, and it's just amazing some of the things how they built these things the way they did. Garden of Gethsemane. This is the Hebrew word for that, and the olive trees in the Garden of Gethsemane can be dated back 2,000 years. There's a wall, or there's a fence around, so you can't actually go walking through the Garden of Gethsemane, but these olive trees are still alive, and it's just amazing, that whole area. One of the things that we learn in Israel when we go is that some of your images of what you think it's like growing up in Sunday school and the pictures that you saw, I can't wait to get to Israel. And Barbie will relate to this story because this is a picture that when she said to me at one point, I just can't wait to see Golgotha and Mount Calvary. I just want to sit on the grass at Jesus' feet. Well, this is Golgotha. There's a bus barn down below, and there's a 4-lane highway above. And it's part of the modern city of Jerusalem. They call it the place of the skull. You can kind of see there's an eye over on the right, and what's left of an eye on the left, and what's left of a nose in the middle. But the mouth area has fallen off through the years. There are some pictures there from the 1800s, and it really does look like a skull. But because of the traffic and the vibration of the traffic and everything, so much of the rock formation has fallen down that it's not really look like a skull like it used to. The Garden Tomb area is an interesting spot. It's owned by the Garden Tomb Society out of England. This is not for sure where Jesus was buried, but it's in the general vicinity. It's close to Golgotha. In fact, right on the edge of Golgotha, right on the edge of the Garden Tomb area, you can go over and look at Golgotha. It's close to the Garden of Gethsemane, but it's not for sure. But we do have an opportunity. There is a tomb area there in the center. That little black area is the doorway going into the Garden Tomb. It's size of a bathroom at the most, but it was the interesting thing that's important about it is because the tomb was owned by Joseph of Arimathea, who was a rich gardener. They have excavated a cistern that was in the area that a rich gardener would have owned. So it's likely that the tomb was in this area somewhere, but to say this is the exact tomb, that would be an inaccurate statement. This is the Bro family, Brad and Jeannie, and their two daughters, Hannah and Ellie. Ellie's now married. She's in the military, and she's been in the military for about 5 years now. Every child in Israel has to serve in the military. Ellie is a computer person, and she's involved in the military and computer somehow. She's not allowed to say, but we know that's what she does. Hannah has a problem with her back. She couldn't pass the the physical. So she served 2 years in a nursing home, and she's a doula. And she also has massage license and that type of thing. After their 2 years of service was done, they were granted Israeli citizenship. Brad and Jeannie are not citizens because they can't get dual citizenship at this point, but because their daughters are citizens, they now have permanent residency. So they can stay there as residents. I've got just a few minutes left, and I'm going to kind of run through something really quick because I could end this really in a lot of different ways, but I just want you to think about the conflict in Israel today. Genesis 21, if you want to look at that in your Bible really quick, the conflict in Israel starts in Genesis 21. And it starts with Abraham and Isaac and Abraham and his son Ishmael. And we're told in Genesis 21, 12 and 13, and I just spilled my water. I don't see any sparks coming, so I don't think it hit the outlet. Genesis 21, we're told that Ishmael will become a great nation. Abraham's told that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars and the sand and the seashore, but he wasn't promised they'd always get along. And we're given the first hint of that in Genesis 21 and verse 13. The son of thy bondservant woman I will make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and he went down, and I'm skipping down a few verses, and down at verse 18, God tells Hagar, arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And then skip over to Genesis 25, and we have another conflict between siblings, and this one obviously between Isaac, the twins, Isaac and Ishmael. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say Israel. Isaac and Esau. And they are descendants here again, and there's a great battle going on before they're born. If you look at chapter 25, verse 21, and Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him. Israel's wife conceived, and the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in thy womb, 2 manners of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. This is the beginning of the conflict that we have in that part of the world. The people groups today are primarily either of the Jewish descendancies or the descendants of the other side of the fence. The conflict that's going on today is some people want to eliminate the Jews. But this is not a new conflict. It's been going on since the beginning of time. Our Old Testament is filled with all the wars when I don't care who it was going up against the various Jewish factions, and they wanted to wipe them out. So it's something that's been going on a long time. It's interesting because today in Israel, the Israeli Arabs are not militant for the most part. A lot of them work in factories side by side with the Jews. They have kids that go to school together, and when things are calm, they get along great. We have a bus driver, we have a bus company that we use every year. Madi, our bus driver, is one of the greatest guys, and the people that went, everybody became friends with Madi. He's invited some of our tour groups to his house. Most people, I tend to think that even those that call themselves Palestinians don't agree with what Hamas has done. And so this conflict here is just so interesting in that way. The Old Testament is filled with conflict, but what I want you to think about is every time that Israel has been attacked since its founding 75 years ago this year in 1948, whether it be the Six-Day War, the war in 74, the war right after they started as a nation. The next day they were declared a nation. They were attacked by Arabs. They've never lost a war yet. it didn't matter if they were outmanned, if they were the armament was totally against them. They came across victorious every time, and that will continue because God protects His people and He protects His land. We don't know when the current conflict will end, but they have a plan in place. They're coming under great fire from the rest of the world. But as believers, I encourage you to pray. Pray for the peace in Jerusalem. Pray for peace in Israel. Pray for protection for the Bro family. We have 2 staff members that live in Israel. The Bros have been there for almost 25 years. And we have another staff member, Stephanie, which is a whole other story. But we need to pray for their protection. Pray for wisdom for Brad to help the Jewish people out in any way he can with the monies that have been sent there. I talked to Brad on the phone night before last, and he said that where they live in the Galilee, the war is quite a ways away. But right now, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are allowing the temporary call-up people, the reserves, to go back home. And a lot of them are going back home to nothing. They've lost their jobs. What they had when they left is not there. And so Brad feels there's going to be a great need to help those people out in the months ahead. So I encourage you to pray for that. And I hope that you've learned a little bit about Israel tonight and kind of put this in place. And when you see the pictures of the war, that's not the Israel we know. And the war is in a very small section of the country. In all the trips we've been there, I've never once felt anxious or afraid or in danger of any way. And I think everybody that went this year would say the same. It's the greatest place. And whenever you have opportunity, I hope you get a chance to go. Thank you. Dr. Russell.